Hi everyone, welcome to a special episode of my Cedar Point Recreation Park. This episode has been edited from a live Twitch broadcast. Today we're going to be working on Magnum XL-200, one of my favorite coasters, and one that we've been ignoring for a while. I did a build for it a while ago, and then I've kind of been ignoring it ever since, but there's a couple tweaks I want to make to it, with a bunch of different parts of it actually. So let's go ahead and fix all that stuff up. I'll close this. So I'm using Google Maps as always for my main source of truth when looking at aerial photos, especially good for older coasters where the photography is pretty good. And then I also found a recreation someone did on New Element a while ago. It's not quite gonna work for what I'm doing because theirs is like bigger, I think, than mine, which is weird because my scale for these coasters is especially large, but theirs looks like it's even bigger. Maybe it's just the screenshot, I don't know. But I did want to take some inspiration from that, just tweak some things, clean some things up. For instance, even just looking at like the aerial photos, this turnaround here at the end of the station isn't great. Yeah, I want to move a whole bunch of stuff around. There's a restaurant here now, another building I forgot to include. I think I'm gonna have to move these hills anyway because this second hill is more over here on the turnaround. I think we're basically rebuilding this whole thing from scratch, and which is honestly not the worst. Yeah, I'm gonna have to redo some of these paths, but that's fine. That's part of doing business. This water park stuff is all pretty nebulous anyway, so it doesn't really matter a whole lot what the layout's like. Okay, so for this second hill, I need to fix it so that the turnaround is at the top of the hill instead of at the bottom, which is what I had before, and it didn't make any sense to do it that way. That's pretty good. But see how far back we are from the corner? This whole hill needs to be pushed forward a whole lot if I want it to flow reasonably. So I think that does mean we need to make the whole ride a bit taller. And the real life hill is like huge. So this second hill, like, you're not getting airtime on this thing. You're slowing down and crawling over the top. At least looking at it from aerial views. I went on this thing last year and I don't really remember the exact nature of the hill. I think this is gonna be such a pain. I thought this would be a really easy one to tweak, but alas. What I really want to make sure is that the train has enough speed. Make sure you have enough speed to clear this hill and doesn't slow to a complete crawl. Okay, that's pretty good. Really fast over this hill, but it kind of is in real life anyway. That's why there's some trims on the way down after this second little bunny hop here. Although I can't make diagonal breaks, so my build is not going to have any. The New Element recreation, they do it so that their turnaround area is orthogonal instead of diagonal, so they can have breaks on their turnaround here, but I don't want to have it going like that. Building on diagonals is tough. It's worth it if you can get something that looks nice. Getting something that looks nice is obviously the hard part. But if I spend too much longer on the layout, I'm going to have no time today for building the station, which is really what we're here for. Really what I wanted to get done with this phase. We're supposed to be building stations and stuff. Alright, this one's going to be interesting also because obviously Magnum has a triangular station. I think it shouldn't be too difficult because we got some, triangular scenery pieces we can work with, and we can do some track architecture if we need to. It's funny, even though it's got a triangular roof on it, the base of the station is kind of jaggy. Like, it has this zigzag pattern. So I guess I could just do this with base blocks and put some walls on it, and that should actually look pretty realistic. If you look at street view, there's like nothing under the station. It's just a bunch of footers hovering the whole thing above the ground, which looked awful on our Millennium Force build, but for Magnum, it actually is pretty realistic. I don't actually know what our roof is going to look like. The actual thing is very flat, so I want it to have as little texture as possible. So I think I'm going to go with this one, even though it's technically like corrugated steel. It looks pretty flat from this angle. My memory of like the queue into Magnum is not great because Magnum's always a walk-on, so I never spend any time in the queue. So I don't really remember exactly like what the orientation of all the path is. I wish we had more space for all this stuff. I want to push it all back a bit, but I can't really. Oh god, I hope I don't regret this. I have a feeling I'm gonna regret this. Ooh, this might actually work out in my favor. Because now if I do that, the top of this hill is gonna be a little bit shorter. Looks like our coaster is working. All right, excellent. I think our flow is a little bit better now too. I think pushing it back a little bit was a good idea. Now we have a little bit more room. So if we do the station here, we're still like too close to top wheel dragster, but that's fine. I think based on the way we have our park layout, it's really kind of the best we can do. When we were visiting the park back when I was in like high school pretty frequently, the strategy was that we'd park in this parking lot here behind Gemini. You have to drive all the way around the park here, and then we walk over and come in on the Magnum entrance. If you get there first thing, there's nobody over here except for the early entrance people. You get on all the rides at the back of the park real quickly because no one's back here yet. And it was a really good strategy. It worked out really well, and then I think a few years ago they stopped letting people do that. Now everyone has to use the general entrance at the front. Very disappointing, but what can you do? Yeah, I'm definitely putting in a lot of work. I do keep track of how long I've been spending on this because I like to keep stats and things. So I could actually tell you. I've got a little spreadsheet because I'm a big nerd. So up until now, before this episode, I've put in 68 hours, which actually is lower than I thought to get to this point. And I think I'm maybe like halfway done. Maybe. It's hard to say for sure because there's still like so much scenery to do, and I don't have any clue how long the scenery is going to take me. Because I'm pretty slow at it. I'm getting faster. Like, doing this stuff is definitely helping me get faster at it, but it's going to be tough when we get to the buildings, especially since a lot of buildings have changed over the years. Like, if you look at Google Street View, those photos are from over 10 years ago. And a lot of those buildings have been completely remodeled since then. And it's going to be really tough to tell what they look like now. I have to like look up some, and I have resources already, so I know where to find the things I need, but I need to find some like walkthrough videos that are recent, like within the last couple of years, and photos and stuff. And I have all those things. It's just that using those as a reference is a lot slower than Google Maps. So that part's kind of annoying. How many times would I say I've been to Cedar Point? Let's see. So when I was a kid, we would go once per year, and I think we went pretty consistently once per year between like 1996 and like 2002 approximately. So call that like 7 or 8 times when I was a kid. And then it kind of slowed down after that. In more recent years, it's definitely been a lot less frequent. I know I went last year. I mean, I've only been like 3 times in the last decade or so. It hasn't been nearly as much as I would have liked. 2014, 2016, 2021. But before that, I'm not really sure. So I would say probably 10 times, a dozen times, I would say. Not as often as a lot of other enthusiasts, for sure. But definitely quite a few times. Man, I freaking love the scenery tool, the scenery manager. It's so good. It makes everything so much easier. Back when I was a kid, like I said, I was going, about once a year back in the late 90s, early 2000s. I actually had a piece of loose leaf notebook paper that actually kept track of what years we went and what coasters I rode. I was keeping my credit count before it was cool. Like I said, I'm a big dork. That piece of paper is long gone. I wish I had made a copy of it or something, but alas. Some of the Street View photos are really good. Especially for the older coasters that were built before 2011, you can get some really good close-ups of some of this maintenance stuff. You look at like fan sites and vlogs and things, nobody takes photos of maintenance areas because most people don't care. I care because I need to know what they look like, but most people don't. But Street View, especially because this section is right along a road that has some pretty good photos. So, they took a photo right here, and you can see a very good view of the transfer track. I've learned a little bit about how transfer tracks work in real life, but I'm not like totally knowledgeable about all the technical details, so this probably isn't like super accurate, but it still looks pretty decent. So that will do for now for our maintenance area. Let's look at some supports. So Magnum's got some nice big boxy aero hyper supports, and I think we'll be using, yeah, the steel lattice work for those. Those always are a pretty good approximation, at least for a larger scale like this, should work pretty well. And this is where things are gonna get tedious. Oh, they need to be gray too, not white. For some reason, I always had it in my head that Magnum has got white supports, but it doesn't. If you look at photos, they're gray. A light gray, but they're definitely gray. I must have always seen them on exceptionally sunny days. Yeah, we would always go on exceptionally sunny days, that's true. So my dad's family is from the Cleveland area, so pretty close to Cedar Point. And my uncle was a teacher, so he'd always have summers off. And I think they would get passes and go pretty frequently, but always in the summer. So when my family would go with them, it was always, yeah, during the summer when school is out. So, you know, July and August, which is the hottest and most busy time to go. Probably not ideal, but that's just the way it worked out. And yeah, it's, like you said, very, very sunny. And it looks like the supports are kind of reflective, a bit of a silvery gray. So yeah, they would appear white for sure. Man, stupid Gemini is in the way. I can't see what I'm doing. It's so rude. Anyway, this is tedious, and I hope you're enjoying watching me place down a bunch of steel latticework pieces. Like, I hate doing these, but it's worth it because they look pretty good when they're done. At least as good as they can for non-custom scenery. And I quite like the way that the ones on the corkscrew turned out, so I feel like, you know, a similar strategy here should work pretty well. It's gonna take a long time. It's gonna look great when it's done, but until we get there. One fun thing I did on Blue Streak, and I want to do on some more of my other coasters, is adding the chain return. Of course, I don't know what the other end of this chain looks like. Like Blue Streak there's like a shed that has all the chain lift mechanisms in it. I don't see a photo of something similar on CP Insiders. I have no idea what this looks like. I'll probably just like put some random scenery down here, but there's like some gear return mechanism. I'll figure that out later. Custom supports are like the most tedious thing ever to do, but if you get good at them, not saying that I'm good at them, but if you get good at them, you can make some really awesome looking stuff. I think some of the stuff that I've made so far for this park has been pretty solid. Not saying it's, you know, the greatest ever or anything. On these diagonal pieces, it actually didn't turn out too bad either. I'm a little bummed that the corners of the latticework are poking out on the diagonal pieces a little bit here. Especially when you view it head on, you can see it looks not great. There's probably a way around this. When you zoom out, this looks pretty sweet. We need some like cross beams, I think, especially for the second hill. But aside from that, pretty happy so far. The turnaround, the pretzel loop doesn't have them. It's got standard column supports, so we can leave in the vanilla ones, and then the station and turnaround after the block breaks have normal supports too. But everywhere else under all these hills, these all have boxy steel supports. I get to add in a whole bunch more. The good news though is that aside from this, there isn't a whole lot else to do for this ride. We're gonna need to add in like the support toppers like I mentioned earlier, and hide the vanilla supports, but aside from that, there's not much left, which is good because we're coming up on 2 hours, and I like to spend about 2 hours per episode anyway, 2.5. This one's taking a little bit longer because I'm also talking to chat, of course. But on average, every one of these station builds is about 2 hours. Millennium Force was definitely longer. That one took 3 and it's still not done. I also spent a lot of time messing with the track layout, which I don't normally do. Like Rougarou, I didn't mess with the track layout at all, so I just built the station, and that one was really quick. That was like an 1.5 hour build. But I spent like 45 minutes goofing around with the layout for Magnum because I needed to fix some issues with it, and they were necessary issues to fix. And I'm glad I spent some time on them, but you know, that's part of the process. You gotta spend time fixing these things. A single rail track is really good for custom supports. I haven't utilized it quite as much in this park yet. There's only a couple places I think I've used it so far. I think I used it for a little bit on Rougarou for the inversions, but it's tough because you need a certain angle of supports if you want to replicate B&M supports and do them well. And even the steep track slope for single rail doesn't quite get you the right angle. Like the game is just not really built to handle it correctly. So it's not super easy all the time to do it the way it needs to be done. Now I gotta hide 100,000 vanilla supports underneath all these steel latticework pieces. Obnoxious, but at least it's easy. Just is time consuming. I guess that's what a lot of RCT making good scenery is, just time consuming. You figure out what you want to do and you spend 1,000 hours doing it. Yes, this is open RCT2. It's the only way I play these days. Just for funsies, I booted up vanilla RCT2 a few months ago just to see how it played, and man, it was not easy. You get so used to shortcuts and all the different extra features of open, and then when suddenly vanilla RCT doesn't have those things anymore, you really feel like you're playing a different game, and it's very weird. As a kid, I had an old PC, I had RC1, but no speakers. Oh no! You gotta have speakers, you gotta have the sound. I love playing with the sound on. I think people who play with sound off are weird. It's like part of the game, you gotta have the sound. It just feels wrong not to have it. Because I played this a bunch when I was a kid as well. The audio, like all the sound effects and everything, like it's very nostalgic for me. It's a very calming and soothing experience. If I don't have them on, it doesn't feel right. Speaking of ride music, I've been forgetting for a lot of the rides to turn on the sound music, but Magnum needs some. I tried to find a while ago which rides have music and which don't. Some do, some don't. Let's actually make sure I have all these. Million Force has got its classic soundtrack, which I'm replicating here with techno style, which sort of works okay. Topful Dragster also has Ready to Go, played over and over again. I think I wanted Rock Style 1 for that. Wicked Twister had a soundtrack by the Crystal Method. And I think the best match I picked for that was Mechanical Style. Not a great match, but close enough. And Magnum has a soundtrack, but not like one specific song. From what I read, it's like vaguely 80s synthwave kind of stuff. So we're gonna go with Space Style. Yeah. I feel like that works pretty well. Space Style's a good song. Maybe not like a perfect fit, but I think it's gonna be pretty close. Have I ever compared my version of Cedar Point to the other recreation in the server browser? Yes, I have. I actually did a little bit of research on that. So the one that's in the server browser was originally a recreation by this kid, 55. I think it was released in like 2009, I want to say. So it was pretty old. There's a whole walkthrough of that on YouTube as well, of the original by this kid, 55. And the version that's on the server browser is that version, and it's been like continually developed over the years since in multiplayer. That version and my version differ in a few significant ways. The original version was, vanilla RCT2, so not using large map. Like I have a very large map that I'm using. And that map also uses custom scenery and rides, which I am not. A couple other differences like that, but I did use it to see if I could like maybe use it as a bit of a reference. But the layouts I think are just too different for me to get much useful inspiration out of it. Which isn't to say it's a bad recreation, because for the time and the tools available when it was released, I think it's pretty good. But yeah, mine's a lot different since I'm using a much larger map, no custom scenery, and no custom rides. That one has, all the custom flat rides by the amazing Earl, and personally not a fan of those. I think they don't look very good. They don't match the graphics and aesthetic of vanilla RCT, so I don't use them. And I don't really need them either, because since I'm using such a bigger map, that I've got plenty of room to just shoestring them, as I've done. And I think that, at least to me, looks a lot better. Matches up what I want to do with the park a lot more nicely. But like I said, that's not to say that it's not a good park for the time and capabilities of vanilla RCT2. I think there was one other, I think I've seen two different recreations. There was another one that I've got like a folder with reference parks. Excuse me, there's that one, and there was another one called Cedar Point 2006, which I think is even older, but it's supposed to be a recreation of the park as it was in 06. So it's got Maverick under construction, it's got Disaster Transport still in there, it's got Wildcat still in there, and it hasn't been updated. But I just wanted to get as many different takes on the park as I could, even though they ultimately wound up not being particularly useful for me. But yeah, I still encourage you to check those out if you're interested. Notice the front gate has a sign saying Dragster will not be open, yeah. It's pretty good. Like I said, they're keeping their version updated to match what the current park is like. So yeah, it makes sense that they would do something like that. But not in my park. In my park, Dragster is open. You can ride it all day long. Dragster is open, Wicked Twister is open. Antique Cars is still open, but I think that's not long for this world, since they have torn down Antique Cars, and we'll probably get some good photos of what's there now here pretty soon, now that the park is open for the season. I think that's all I want to do for supports. There's still a lot more to do on the second half of the ride, but I'll look at that later, I think, because I want to wrap up some of the other station area. I think I didn't do the tunnels. Tunnels are tricky though. How the heck do you do tunnels on Magnum? We could also try track architecture. I think I like the track architecture version better because you don't have the weird gaps in the side quite as much. You don't have the round top. So this is the trade-off that we got to make. Going on 3 hours. I did not expect this to be such a long stream. I did not expect Magnum to be such a large amount of work for what seemed like a relatively simple coaster. Oh god, this is gonna be really hard with track architecture. I don't know how I'm gonna do this actually. Oh, because we can't use the car ride over here because there's no diagonals on car rides. But we can use the wooden coaster. Yeah. It's kind of a bummer. I'm gonna have to figure out a different way to do the topper for the wooden track. That was easy enough, but now what do we do for the siding? I could use a monorail track because monorail track can go up and down on a diagonal, and it's got granularity with how you want to layer it. So this could actually work. It's going to be a bit janky, but you know that's how we do it with diagonal supports. That kind of works. Now this is going to be super tedious because you have to do this manually for every single piece along every single tile. Because we're copying and pasting diagonal pieces with Tile Inspector, you can't build it with the construction window. But I think this might actually kind of work out. All right, but I'm not gonna do all that on stream. I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna call it here for today. We've gone over 3 hours and I'm hungry. I need to get going and get out of this chair. And I'm gonna do some of this more tedious stuff off stream. But that's gonna do it for Cedar Point Live for today. Hope this was interesting / enjoyable. But thanks everyone for hanging out. We're gonna call it there. But I'm gonna head out. Bye.